before I leave and go off for drinks, I click on the chat button, and then there's a little square with 3 dots. Click on that little square with 3 dots and click Save Chat. Now, it will save it to a spot on your computer. And you can pick that spot, but it's going to be in your computer. But if you do it right now, you're only going to get a chat that happened before because it doesn't know to copy what's behind it. And I save them. And I just talked to David Rhodes, our webmaster, about this, or chatted with him about it. We're going to be able to put the printed format of the chat, eventually put the printed format of the chat in our website. So if you miss it and you didn't save it, it isn't gone. Just like the program's not gone. You can't interact with the tape, but you get close. Got something else for you right now. I got to tell you all about this. Jim Brandt does our artwork, and before we changed to the org and settled that, we had 100 decals printed up for Worldwide Woodturners, but it's got worldwidewoodturners.com at the bottom of it. But it's our logo. It's Worldwide Woodturners decal or sticker, and it's suitable for applying everywhere but right here. It's too oily. But you can get this decal. Here's the deal. And I'm gonna go to my share screen thing so that we get it up right. There it is. And I'm gonna go to play it from the start. So Worldwide Woodturners. See woodturners.com. We changed that out to read woodturners.org, and that's what it originally looked like. And now it says woodturners.org, and we have them. But here's the deal: the decals are produced for members only. Yeah, right. The cost is $2 each for a single. So if you want one decal, it's going to cost you $2. If you want to add more to that package, they're $1 each additional, because that's what it's going to cost us, $1 each to get the decals. And then I have to get them packaged and shipped to you. It's all volunteer work, okay? If you buy one for $2, two for $3, three for $4, I know this might be high math for some of us woodturners, but that's the way it's going to be. Here's the key: the payment for these must be by check or cash. No credit card accounts, no credit card sales. We don't have an account. The organization's not set up with a formal account at the bank yet, so I can't take you in a credit card or any other way. Tax thing, and I got enough of those problems. I don't want any more. But if you'd like one, that's how you get them. My address, I told you earlier, this will be here, Eddie Castleman, 330 Highway Drive, Jefferson, Louisiana, 70121. And if I get the opportunity, I will put it in the chat, or one of my co-hosts will put it in the chat here tonight, so it's there. You can get a copy of it. But right now we have 100 of those decals, and when we can, we will get another version of them with org on it. But for right now, we're not there, and I need to sell off these 100 because we bought them before we knew we were going to change to org. Yeah, but it's one of those things that happen. So if you're interested, get in, send us the check or money or whatever you want to, or we choose, and we will get you a decal in the mail. And they're coming in a little plastic pouch, and they were donated, the pouches. The only thing we can't get donated is the postage. Government won't work with us on that. Anybody else for a gallery tonight?
I got a bowl. I don't know how to get on, but
who's that?
This Paul Williamson.
Paul, well, don't worry about that, buddy. We can get you there.
Well,
there.
I turned this bowl today and had my first experience with dyeing, which was, I think, a disaster. But anyway, I guess it's not bad for the first time. This was turned out of pine, a piece of lumber about 100 years old.
Whoa, that's nice. And you got to remember, Paul, you can't make mistakes if you don't do anything. So I'm glad you got to play with that a little bit and play with the dye. What you will find out, Paul, is if you didn't sand right, you'll see your sand marks because
Oh,
the
no,
dye will accent them.
I think it was the application of the dye.
Okay. But you know what? In this club, you could blame it on the product. It's okay.
Well, yeah, because I always sand according to your instructions.
Well, it's sanding is knocking down ridges. Ridges cause the deflection of the light. Deflection of light causes lines. Lines you can't see through. So the thing is, if you step down to something that'll knock it off, and then bring it up slowly without skipping the grit, you will have the chatoyance we saw a little while ago and a couple other pieces. And that's critical for a good turn pieces. The finish is called a finish because when you're done with it, you're finished. I used to do this. I'd see a guy make a cut and say, I can start with 320. You really can't. Okay, it's up here. Maybe you think you can. But you've got scratches heavier than that slice at 320. And if you don't take those scratches out, they're just going to keep coming through. So if you step back down to 100 or whatever, it's not that much. You just even out everything. And then you step up to 150, then you step up to 220, then you step up to 320. Just take those gradual steps. You'll take the big hills and make them into smaller hills, and smaller hills, and smaller hills, and smaller hills, and then they won't be noticed. And the only way to get chatoyance out of a piece is to knock down those lines. And my wife doesn't like to use the term chatoyance, thinks it sounds a little frilly, but it's cat's eye. It's a term for cat's eye. And they will blink back at you. I've got pieces here in my studio, in our garden room, that sometimes walking in the room, the light's right, you can see they look like they shimmer at you, and that's a good finish. We have Doug Rowe online for tonight, and Doug, are you geared up?
I'm ready.
All right, I'm going to switch over and put you on spotlight and get Doug in here. Doug and I spoke the other day because. On a side note, if this could be a side note, I watched Doug prep and turn a bowl the other day on his lathe, and he set it up, he chucked it up, and then he's just ready to get started on turning, and I'm sitting here at my desk saying, "Don't please, don't please, don't please, don't." You know why I was saying that, Doug?
You were afraid I wasn't going to bring the tailstock up.
Exactly. I mean, I'm thinking, please don't do that. That thing's going to kiss you in your head. But
yeah.
But and then he brought it up. He really impressed me. He brought the tailstock up. It wasn't a pretty piece of lumber.
No, it's still on the lathe. They're all fixing to see it.
Good. All right. Well, take off. Let's do a demo.
All right. So what we're talking about is the different ways to chuck things up. In this club so far, we've talked about using the faceplate. We've talked about a chuck jaws, mortise, and taper. We've talked about a worm screw, but we really haven't demoed them and talked about what's safe, what's not safe. So before I get into this, we're going to step away from wood turning just for a second. I want you to think back to when you first started driving a car. You first learned, you got in that car, depending on what year it was, maybe it had a seatbelt, maybe it didn't. Nowadays they do, right? So you get in that car, you reach back, you put the seatbelt on, you check all your mirrors, then you finally start the car, check all the mirrors again, slowly back out of the driveway, stopping about 3 or 4 times because you're checking everything to make sure it's perfect. Now how do y'all do it? You jump in the car. If you're a smoker, you're already lighting a cigarette. Maybe you're reaching for that seatbelt as the car's already turning on. About halfway down the driveway, maybe that seatbelt finally clicked. Out into the street and off you go. Learning speed versus, well, in the military, we call it combat speed or just real world speed, right? So when I'm going over these different ways to hold something on the lathe, we're at that beginner phase. There's steps that I probably shortcut. I know I shortcut. Some of you will probably shortcut. But that's not the way we're going to teach it in case we have that person watching tonight that's never done it. And when we skip a step, it's not so much that we skipped a step. We probably just did something faster than the way we used to do it. And so we want to be real careful that we're teaching everybody the right way first. They can learn their mistakes on their own. They'll find a shortcut maybe when they're at their woodturners club, or maybe we can help them with a shortcut later on down the road. But when I'm taking it real slow and you're like, okay, Doug, we got this. I've been turning for a few years. Understand this isn't necessarily for you, although a good review always helps, but this is more for that person that's more in that beginning phase. So this piece right here is what Eddie was talking about. I was turning this live on Facebook. Let me see if I can fix that. It is 100% not round. This was a crotch piece when it started. And there really was no flat side anywhere on this. So the bowl, if you can see it, has been turned out now. So this was mounted with a worm screw turned the other way. And so I had just set it all up and I was getting ready and I was basically explaining what I was doing, saying I'm about to turn this piece. And that's probably about the point where Eddie needed to go in for heart surgery because we thought we were going to turn this thing without the tail stuff. But we did bring it up. Now, again, if you're a beginning turner, you're probably starting off with stuff that's already round, and that's a good thing. Keep it simple. But eventually you're going to get into these crazy pieces that aren't round. And you need that extra security to hold it on because this thing is going to shake and dance everywhere. So we're going to, right now, it's now reverse chucked with a tenon. So first thing I'm going to do before I do anything is check that my jaws are still tight. Because what happens as the wood sits there overnight, you turned it, you go in the house, you go to bed, you come back out the next day, moisture, no matter how dry that is, has left that wood. That means that wood has shrunk. So that means there's probably the slightest gap in there between your jaws clamping down or expanding, depending on which mode you use with your jaws, and it's not going to be tight in there. So we always want to check that to make sure that's tight. We're not going to do any turning right now, but I just want to demonstrate now that this has been turned down, and I am turned as far as I'm going to go. All I've got left now is a ton of sanding, and I'm going to explain that just for a second. But what I want to show you is when I turn this lathe on, I am not going to get very much speed out of this. Reason being is because it is not a round piece. So, well, you can't see my lights. Let me fix this right quick. I'm going to show you that. Watch those lights start to dance. There they go. That's not even 300 RPM yet. So the point I want to make is when we start getting into pieces that aren't round, we're going to get a lot of shaking. So if your stuff is not chucked up right, boy, you're just asking for troubles. It can be done. You just got to do it safely. So I'm going to move you on over here. The first way that most of us learn is with a faceplate. And a lot of people will use the term faceplate is the safest way to turn. I agree with that if the faceplate was applied properly. So what is the one type of screw? You've heard us say this time and time again in this club. Never, ever, ever, and again, never, ever use drywall screws. Reason being is they're brittle. So this is my screw of choice. I probably picked these up at Ace or one of the hardware stores. Not drywall screws, right? When I was in my breakout room last week, somebody was asking about what size screws. I generally use either a number 10 or a number 12. These ones happen to be 12. The key to the faceplate is, again, it needs to be tight to your piece. If you don't have a flat piece to start off with, your faceplate is going to start to wobble on you. So this one is on there nice and tight. So we check over all our safety issues. What do you see that's wrong with this piece if I was to put this on the lathe right now? What's going to come apart?
Bark.
That bark is not going to stay on there very long, is it? So that's something you got to pay attention to. A lot of us to make those natural edge bowls and keep the bark on. And it can be done, but not with this piece. It's never going to happen. I don't care how much CA glue you put in there. That bark's coming off right quick and in a hurry as soon as that lathe starts turning. So you got a couple of options. Peel the bark off before you even get going, or, you know, put it on, step back. There's some other techniques to get it off. But the key again is safety. So this faceplate is applied properly. We've used the correct screws. It had a nice flat surface to get started. So a faceplate. Are there any questions on the faceplate before we move on?
I can add one little remark.
Sure.
And make sure that the outer rim of the faceplate totally touches the wood. It's the outer rim that has the leverage. So
right in here is what he's talking about.
Right, it's the outer rim. That's what has to touch all the way around.
And so when you're grabbing that piece of wood out of the fire pile, or, you know, wherever you got it, it wasn't a bowl blank that you bought from Woodcraft or Rockler. That's where you're going to have to check out your piece as you're putting it on and check that out. Did this set? Let me be perfectly honest with you. This one did not. So how did I fix it? I used my sander and I worked a flat spot until I was comfortable and had a good flat spot that I knew my faceplate would sit down there perfect. Another technique is a Forstner bit. If this one's not the right size by any means, but if I was to put this on a drill press and hit that with a Forstner bit, I would now have a flat surface that my faceplate could go down in. So there's different ways to make that happen.
And that hole with the Forstner bit will have a centered depression for you to help you line it up. And I think in a couple of weeks, Ronnie will show us a gizmo he has for lining those up, which is brain dead simple, but you wouldn't think about it. And if you're off, you're going to get some more wobble out of it. I've got one that'll go up to 3.5 inches across that they use in a boating industry to put in cup holders in boat decks. And a friend gave it to me. Then I found out it was worth over $100, and I'm not giving it back.
Oh, wow.
Doug, what's your thought on the size of the faceplate?
So I do have some bigger ones. So here's a large one. You can see by the paper on it, it doesn't get much use. And in order for me to use this one, I also have to put the adapter on my lathe. The faceplate that I was just showing you, that is the one that came with my Powermatic, and it's just super strong. I love it. It's heavy. So that's my preferred faceplate. But if I'm going to turn something that's really big in diameter, then I want more surface-to-surface contact, and then I'll go with a larger one.
you.
A sharp, low-angle hand plane going across grain works real well too for flattening it out. It works pretty quicker than you think.
There you go. Yes. Yep. Thanks for bringing that up.
It's sharp.
Just a quick note on the screws. That number 12 screw takes a number 3 Phillips. Use anything less, you'll strip out the head. You need to use a number 3 Phillips.
Good point. Good point.
I found out from a cabinet place nearby that for mounting cabinets, because there's too many Chu-Key carpenters out there mounting with drywall screws, they have some square drive number 10s and 12s available for mounting heavy cabinet work. And those square drives are awesome because they do not slip, or at least in my opinion, they don't slip.
Right.
So we'll move on to tenon and mortise. Mortise, recess, same thing. Tenon, spigot, same thing. Tenon or spigot, meaning it's coming out from the piece of wood, and your jaws are going to grab on. Recess or mortise, meaning there's a hole and your jaws are going to go and expand and grab. So this piece, like I said, I'm finished turning it. I have a ton of sanding to do. I have a ton of sanding for two different reasons. One, it's just a really bizarre shape, which then two, makes me have to turn at a much slower speed because we get the wobbles. And when it's wobbling, you can't turn it at all. So you slow down till you get something turning smooth. Well, then when you're turning that slow, even though your tools are sharp, it's just hard to get a clean cut. Maybe that's operator error, but that seems to be my experience. When I turn too slow, I just can't get a clean cut, and I have to fix it with a lot of sanding. So I knew going into this that was going to be the issue. I also know I want to play around with these edges, and I can't do that as much turning as I can with my sander. So anyway, that's a story for another day. But going back to the tenon, if I was not finished with this bowl and I just took it off, I've really messed myself up. There's a little technique that you can do where you can take your Sharpie and you can make your little mark on your piece and your little mark on your chuck. So then you can put it back in the same spot. It's been my experience, I never get it right. And it's not true. And then I got to go back and do some turning and true it up again. More times than not, that usually happens when something comes off the lathe because I wasn't being safe. And I've showed you the hole in my light up there. So that has happened at my house. Okay.
Dave Leader adds just now in chat, make sure you note the number of that jaw on your piece, because if you have to go back to it again, you want to use the proper jaw and the same jaw again.
Oh, okay, yes. So yeah, there's different size jaws that you can get for your chuck. So as you get more into this, you'll see. So if I wanted to, on this one-way stronghold chuck, I can change out my jaws to a much larger jaw. So then, yeah, so that's a good idea. Which jaws were you using at the time? Thank you for bringing that up.
Doug, when you put it up there, when you put that piece on it, put your tenon back into the chuck there for a moment. You see the gap they have between the jaws right there, folks? That gap he's got is what, a 1/4 inch?
Oh, it's a lot bigger than that, but that's because I got it open.
Okay.
So,
but the key is you can stretch that chuck out, open it all the way up, and you can end up with being able to hold the 3-inch round piece maybe. But draw it out on a piece of paper and see where your jaw is going to make contact with your 2 3/8 inch jaws clamping on something that's 3 inches across. You're not going to get a lot of contact. So don't overdo that thing. I've seen turners on YouTube have to work on getting their chuck fitted up 3 or 4 times because it didn't have a template.
yeah.
Dan showed us a template a couple of weeks ago.
I make sorry, don't mean to cut in. I have a little piece of wood hanging over my lathe that I drew for mortises and tenons for my 2 favorite size jaws that I use. I marked the center of where that would be. So all I have to do is set it up to the bottom of my bowl and my tailstock center. I don't even have to pull my tailstock away in case, I don't want to. And I just make a mark on this side. And I, like you said, you take your chuck jaws and pull them in almost all the way, not too much. Give yourself some, especially wet wood. It likes to, it's a lot more squeezy. I don't know what word to use for that. But if you make these little templates, after a while, it's like muscle memory. You don't even need them much anymore. But anyways, that's what they look like. That's for my Spitty 5mm, and that's for my 135, I think it is. And then that's the mortise for it as well, and the mortise for the side. And I marked them so I know which ones that they're for, and mark the centers. And because if, like Eddie said, if you don't have full contact on that, and that was a beginner mistake for me. I really struggle with that, understanding how to make proper mortises and tenons. And if you don't, you will throw things across the shop, as you can see in some of my very, very early videos. I like to sling things. So that was why. Admittedly, that was
We've
why.
all been there.
So
Yep.
yeah.
Thank you,
I
Kim.
like to
Appreciate
say
it.
I like to say it was drywall screws that almost killed my dog. And that was when a piece came off my lathe and landed right next to my poor sleeping dog. And she jumped up. What in the world just happened? Yep, that was a dumb, brand new wood turner with no training and didn't know what he was doing. Okay, so we talked faceplate, we've talked tenon, we talked the issues that you'll run into if you're using a tenon and you take it off and try to put it back on. We talked about when you're using a tenon and you've walked away for any period of time, or even just while you're turning, go back and check to make sure you're still twisted down tight, especially if you're turning greenwood, which is primarily what I turn, is greenwood. And so that moisture is just coming out as you're turning, and that wood is shrinking, and you will start to get a wobble in there if you don't pay attention. That wobble is a guarantee that it's going to take flight. Whatever wood you're using becomes bird wood, meaning it's going to fly, right? So pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. Stop and check those jaws regularly. Okay, moving on to the mortise or the recess. So now I'm going to expand my jaws. Again, this is a bowl that's already finished. So let me just, whoops, if I would turn that the correct way. And this is another thing like Eddie was talking about. You don't want to be able to expand these jaws super wide. So you got to, find that sweet spot in there. So I'm just going to give this a little twist so I can let go of it. But I'm not going to turn this, so we're okay. All right. Same thing with the mortise or the recess. If I was turning this bowl and it comes off for any reason, to put it back on there, it's never going to be exactly the same. You're going to have to true things up. So if you know you've got to take it off for a reason, mark it so you can get it at least somewhat close. All right. The biggest concern that I have with using the mortise or the recess is when you've made that mortise or recess and your jaws are going in there, you want a good clean surface for those jaws to expand on. My tool of choice is a skew. You could use a parting tool. I've seen guys in my club that are good enough to do it with a gouge. I'm not. And then you've also got to know with when both the tenon and the recess, do your jaws call for a straight wall or a tapered wall?
There you go. You got
right?
it.
So
Okay.
different jaws require different.
Yeah.
Can you explain that better, Mark?
Talking to me?
Yeah.
Was that Mark talking just now? Somebody was speaking.
Okay. All right. Let me go downstairs and I'll show you how to solve the problem. I'll bring a tool up and I'll show you how to solve the problem. I'll be right
Okay,
back.
let us know when you get back.
All right.
All right, so at any rate, tapered versus a straight wall, right? Just know what your jaws call for, and then that's what you're gonna create. Now, when you are creating a mortise or a recess, it needs to be deep enough for the jaw to get in there, but not so much that you're resting against the back part of your jaws. Whoops. Uh-oh, I just dropped you guys. Are you still there?
Yep, we got you.
All right. I just knocked it off the tripod. So we want the jaw to go inside the recess, but I don't necessarily want to be back against the back side of the jaw.
That holds true for the tendon also.
Also true for the tendon, yep. We don't want to be all the way deep. Let me see where we go. All the way deep in there to where the wood is touching the backside. And the reason for that is if the flat part is not flat, then you're going to get